KMCV News coming up next, and we've had an awfully busy news day getting ready for tonight's newscast.
A very busy day. Here's what you can look forward to in the next half hour. Local attorneys talk about Saturday's 9th Circuit Court decision that the Supreme Court erred in two decisions affecting Article 12.
The Democratic gubernatorial candidates Froilan Tenorio and Jesse Borja say if elected, they can deliver a clean government.
In more court proceedings today for a number of suspects charged with selling ice. 7 people were arrested 3 weeks ago for selling the drug to informers. We'll be selling you on those stories and much more ahead on KMCV News. Stay with us.
Buenas noches para todos hamzu tatao saipan luta zantinian guahusi Carlotta de Leon Guerrero.
Good evening and welcome to another week of news here at KMCV. I'm Glenn Wakai. We'll have weather and sports in just a few minutes.
But first, topping tonight's newscast. With the issuance of a decision Friday by the 9th Circuit Court of Appeals, the Ferreira versus Borja Article 12 case has now been heard by judges in 4 courts. The 9th Circuit judges ruled that a state cannot validly effect a taking of property by the simple expedient of holding that the property right never existed. Here's a closer look at the 9th Circuit decision. The 9th Circuit decision reads, quote, "The Commonwealth cannot constitutionally deprive a person of a property interest through the expedient of an untenable judicial interpretation of local law that denies that a property interest ever existed," end quote. The plaintiff in the case is of Northern Marianas descent, Diana Chong Ferreira. She sued to quiet title for 3 parcels of land in the Commonwealth, which she had purchased from the Borja family. She obtained financing for the purchase from James and Barbara Grizzard, who are not of Annamite descent. In return for the financing, she entered into a partnership agreement with the Grizzards, in which she agreed to lease the land to the partnership for 40 years. The Borjas contested Ferreira's claim to title, arguing that their sale of the land to her was void because it violated Article 12 by giving a permanent interest in Sinamay land to persons not of Annamite descent, thus creating a resulting trust. 2 of the Sinamay Supreme Court justices hearing the case agreed with the Borja argument, and Special Judge Edward King dissented. His opinion was supported by the 9th Circuit, quoting again from their opinion. "We agree with Judge King that the Sinamay Supreme Court's application of the resulting trust theory was untenable," end quote. The opinion goes on to state, quote, "It would be incongruous to use a court's equitable powers to create a resulting trust in favor of someone and then use the existence of the resulting trust as a basis for finding that that person has violated the law. Yet this is exactly what the Sinamay Supreme Court has done," end quote. Further on in the opinion, the 3 9th Circuit judges write, quote, "The Supreme Court attempts to evade the illegal purpose restriction to the creation of resulting trust by saying that a violation of Article 12 does not occur until and unless a court declares a transaction to be violative of Article 12. Thus, the resulting trust did not have an illegal purpose at the time of its creation. We agree with Judge King that this is a legal fiction," end quote. Judges Norris, Beezer, and Kleinfeld write, quote, "The Borjas claim that the 9th Circuit cannot review the CNMI Supreme Court's application of the common law resulting trust doctrine because even if the court's analysis is incorrect in any way, it is solely and completely a matter of Commonwealth law. The Borjas are, of course, correct that the CNMI Supreme Court is the ultimate expositor of local Northern Marianas law. However, we may examine the CNMI Court's interpretation of CNMI law if that interpretation is untenable or amounts to a subterfuge to avoid federal review of a constitutional violation," end quote. The 9th Circuit vacated the judgment of the CNMI Supreme Court and remanded it back to the CNMI for further proceedings consistent with their opinion.
It took 8 months of deliberation for the 9th Circuit Court of Appeals to reject the Sinamay Supreme Court's application of a resulting trust. After bouncing around in the legal system for 7 years, 3 men in San Francisco have now put the ball in the Sinamay Supreme Court. What you see is a valuable resource, one that pits neighbors, friends, families, and businesses against one another. The fight rages on with numerous Article 12 cases pending in the legal system. Friday's Ninth Circuit Court decision is being hailed by some as a landmark. However, Attorney Ted Mitchell calls it an intrusion on self-government.
They have no business whatsoever telling the Supreme Court how to develop, interpret, apply, modify the Commonwealth constitutional law or the Commonwealth common law or anything else that's a matter of purely local, non-federal nature.
However, Ferrero's legal counsel contends when the CNMI Supreme Court stripped her of that title to the land, that was a violation of the 14th Amendment or due process. Attorney David Nevitt remembers Mitchell's arguments in San Francisco.
The quote from Judge Beezer from the bench when Mitchell asserted the Ninth Circuit didn't have jurisdiction to hear this case was, and I'm quoting it, Mr. Mitchell, you're nuts. And I share that perspective.
The resulting trust was the nuts and bolts holding many Article 12 claims together. The Carl Smith law firm feels the Ninth Circuit's rejection will greatly affect pending cases. Nevitt says that judges could have decided the case itself instead of remanding it back to the CNMI Supreme Court.
I think that was probably done out of respect and deference to the Commonwealth Supreme Court, and I'm confident that the Commonwealth Supreme Court will look at the Ninth Circuit's decision, will give it deference and respect, and then do the right thing.
Mitchell plans to go back to the CNMI Supreme Court and present the same case he did 7 years ago. Then he expects to be back in San Francisco.
If we go back there with a new decision that comes out exactly the same way, but is based on a more appropriate type of analysis, the agency trust analysis, I don't see how the Ninth Circuit has any business reversing that. And it doesn't look like they will.
We will be reacting to Mr. Mitchell's pleadings, and I have no idea what theories he's likely to come up with in this next go-round.
Although Mitchell admits the Ninth Circuit Court decision is a step backwards for his clients, he says it is by no means the end of Article 12 battles.
For those who may want to pick up this decision and trumpet it as the end of Article 12 enforcement in the Commonwealth, I think they're celebrating a little too early.
The makeup of the panel hearing this case will be different from the justices that made the original decision in 1988. Back then, they were Justices Borja, Dela Cruz, and King. It's anticipated that justices hearing it for the second round of battles will be Dela Cruz, Atalik, and Special Judge Mack.
The CNMI budget for fiscal year 1993 not only gets rejected by the House of Representatives, it's booted back to the Conference Committee, the same group that could not come to a consensus earlier this month. Members met in session this afternoon to discuss the amendments to the budget, which the Senate handed down last week. Senators altered the definition of what a full-time employee is, once again a move that Saipan delegates had been opposed to since last year.
It's inconceivable that we continue to provide FTEs when there is no money.
The House rejected the new language because it would enable Rhoda and Tinian to hire more than one person for one job. The amendments were voted down 11-4. However, by sending it to conference, members hope that a consensus can be reached on just the amendments.
The Commonwealth budget is one, if not the most important, constitutional responsibility that our people delegated to us. We must put aside our personal conviction and differences and look at the interests of the people of the Commonwealth that elected us to this office.
We cannot continue to play, Mr. Speaker. We cannot continue to point fingers and hold one person responsible.
Meanwhile, fiscal year 93 ends at the end of September. The governor has transmitted the budget for fiscal year 94, and that budget is now at the House.
And island waters claimed the lives of 2 people this past weekend, according to the Department of Public Safety Information Officer Kathy Hsu. On Saturday afternoon, DPS received a call from Pierre Lam asking for assistance. Lam reported that a group of 8 people went fishing at Tank Beach when one of them was swept away. The man's name has not been released. He was described as a Chinese national employed by the Canton restaurant. His body was found today between the marina and Tank Beach. The wrath of the ocean struck again yesterday when a female Japanese tourist drowned at the grotto. Shu says 27-year-old Hisako Sakura, a guest at the PIC, was diving with 3 others at the grotto when she panicked and got into trouble. Her instructor administered CPR, but she was pronounced dead at the Commonwealth Health Center.
Coming up next, lots of court news. 11 of the 15 arrested in the recent prostitution raid enter a plea today.
And jury selection begins for the man accused of running over and killing local businessman Sidney Kwan.
With just 75 days left before the November election, voters have heard precious little from the Democratic gubernatorial team. Froilan Tenorio and Jesse Borja met the public Friday night at a fundraiser for their candidacy, and afterwards they talked issues with reporters. Here's a look at the Democratic candidates for governor and lieutenant governor for the CNMI.
I ask for your support for Froilan and Jesse because I know that Jesse and Froilan will deliver the integrity, the honesty, and your confidence that you deserve. And let's party! Viva Froilan! Viva Jesse!
The Democratic gubernatorial campaign kicked off with a well-attended fundraiser for Froilan Tenorio and Jesse Borja. During his remarks to the crowd, gubernatorial candidate Tenorio explained why he's seeking the top post in the NMI.
And we share your concerns for the fate of our Commonwealth. We feel that we need to replace the incumbent administration if we are to protect our Commonwealth from further disaster.
Borja, who was unable to go public with his candidacy for the lieutenant governor's office until 6 months after his resignation as a judge on the Supreme Court bench, says the Tenorio-Borja team stands for clean government.
A government, my friends, that will place the interests of the residents of the CNMI over and above personal interests.
Tenorio observed the gag order imposed on Borja until August 19th, and so his position on many key issues is relatively unknown. On tax reform, Tenorio says it's time the tax structure was reassessed, but he says that doesn't necessarily translate into a bigger chunk for the government out of everyone's paychecks.
I feel that we need to have a tax reform. I just don't agree that with many of the versions that I have been reading, that a tax reform will necessarily mean tax increases.
Tenorio, a former senator and resident representative to Washington, says he would support increased representation for the NMI in the U.S. Congress if by doing so our covenant is not altered.
I would support the non-voting delegate status for the Washington representative only if provisions were incorporated, were added in the resolution that the covenant would not be affected in any way by granting us the non-voting delegate status.
Another Democratic candidate for a gubernatorial seat was in the audience Friday night. Former Guam Lieutenant Governor Eddie Regis will seek his party's nomination for next year's general election in Guam.
This is why I'm here, because I'm rooting for the Democratic Party, not only here in NMI, but of course in Guam.
Guam Republican Senator Marilyn Manabusan was also in attendance. She's a strong believer that the Mariana Islands should work to become closer together, and she feels the Tenorio-Borja team agrees with her.
There's a distinguishable distinction that Rota, Saipan, Tinian, and Guam are the only islands that can be called the Marianas. And so there is an extension of the kind of leadership here that I really endorse.
Island residents have often wondered what Tenorio's running mate Jesse Borja would have to say about the controversy surrounding the Article 12 decisions that he made while sitting as a judge on the Supreme Court. Mr. Borja, could you tell us how you feel about any efforts by lawmakers to interpret Article 12?
Well, that's getting right to the point, Carlotta, huh? Well, let me first start off by saying that I am very happy with Article 12. I am also very happy with the decision of the Supreme Court with regard to Article 12, but I want to add that was on the panel of the Supreme Court that issued those two decisions that people are claiming are erroneous, and so I am biased naturally in their favor. I think that people are jumping the gun at this point in time. Okay? Nico Hotel, for example, is all upset because it feels that it may be in a situation similar to the Aldan Pierce case. And I think that's wrong because the Nico Hotel case involves a corporation. And that has not been before the Supreme Court yet. And I think that the Supreme Court should be given the chance to decide a case like that first before people can say that, hey, they're wrong or they're right.
At the time of our interview Friday night, the Ninth Circuit Court decision hadn't yet reached the NMI.
Let's now reach over for some court news. Jury selection for the man accused of running over and killing local businessman Sidney Kwan began today. Francisco Remengmao faces one count of vehicular manslaughter. He allegedly was speeding on Beach Road earlier this year, overtaking two cars when he struck Kwan. Kwan was training on his bicycle for the Tagaman Triathlon. Remengmao's defense, however, may have gotten a boost a few weeks ago when test results from an off-island expert revealed that Remengmao was going under the speed limit. That witness will be flown in for the trial. Jury selection is expected to take a couple of days. And 11 of the 15 arrested in the recent prostitution raids appeared in Superior Court today for their arraignments. 9 of them, like their 4 colleagues last week, pleaded not guilty to charges of either prostitution or promoting prostitution. The remaining 2 will have to wait another week because they did not have representation at this morning's hearing. At the same time, a release stipulation which bans all of them from being near their place of employment is being contested by 2 lawyers. Tim Bellis and Anthony Long say that since their clients haven't been found guilty of anything, it violates their right to work. Judge Marty Taylor agreed to hear this matter separately later this week. The prostitution cases are set for a status conference next month.
The husband and wife team allegedly involved in a 7-member drug ring also appeared in Superior Court this morning. They were implicated by 2 other suspects as their supplier of the drug known as ice. The woman, Xenia Guevara, has been released to a third-party custodian, Myrna Lalabanan, the godmother of her 1-year-old child. This order basically places Guevara under house arrest at Lalabanan's Capitol Hill residence until the case is closed. Meanwhile, her husband, Felino, had his preliminary hearing. 2 cooperating suspects in the same alleged drug ring testified today that Felino was indeed their source for ice. That gave the Attorney General's office enough probable cause to hold him over for trial, which has been set for November 29th. A third suspect, Jennifer Parani, asked the court for a hearing which would modify bail. He essentially wants to be released to a third party. Tomorrow, a hearing is set to determine whether the person he has chosen is eligible to be responsible for him. Parani is currently being held on $250,000 bail.
It's a storm, it's not that big, and it's gone out of our vicinity. If you're wondering what's wrong with our weather, here's the latest on Tropical Storm Vernon. As of 1 o'clock this afternoon, Tropical Storm Vernon was located at 680 statute miles northeast of Guam. Winds near the center are 50 miles per hour, gusting up to 65 miles per hour. Although Tropical Storm Vernon does not pose any threat to the CNMI, expect more rain showers and thunderstorms with gusty southerly winds and hazardous warning that affects the island of Guam, Rota, Tinian, Saipan, and the Northern Marianas. And taking a look now at the forecast for this evening, expect cloudy skies with widely scattered light to moderate showers, wind southerly 15 to 20 miles per hour with gusts to 35 miles per hour near showers, decreasing to 10 to 15 miles per hour, gusting up to 25 after midnight, and the low temperature in the mid-70s. Seas tonight will be slight to moderate, 3 to 5 feet, surf conditions 46 feet in southern clockwise through northern exposures and 2 to 4 feet elsewhere. Our first sight this evening will take place up at 11:34 with a high of 2.4 feet, and expect the low tide just hours later at 2 o'clock early Tuesday morning with a low of sea level. The sun will set at 6:38 this evening, and sunrise tomorrow morning will be at 6:09. And for the forecast for tomorrow, expect mostly cloudy skies with widely scattered showers, winds southwesterly 10 to 15 miles per hour, gusting up to 25 miles per hour near showers, and the high temperature in the mid-80s. And that's all for our weather report.
Thank you very much, Vicki. And that's all the time we have for news. On behalf of the entire KMCV News team, those of us in front of and behind the cameras, thanks for joining us tonight. And be sure and join us Wednesday night for the John Anderson Show. John's guest will be CUC Director Ray Guerrero. Enjoy your evening. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.